Back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Delicious cold water on a bright and sunny Saturday morning. It's beautiful. I got the windows open. The sun is out. And we're talking about social media. So stay tuned. We're going to review this article, Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Has Been Uniquely Stupid, that blames social media for the totality of our ills, sort of. And we're going to debate its merits. So stay tuned.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
You know, when it's like spring semester in college, maybe some of you remember this. I had this a couple years ago when I was actively going to school. It's dormant right now, but I'll go back, I promise. You get to like mid-April and the weather shifts, and then you've lost all interest in doing any of your homework because you just want to go outside. That's exactly how all three of us feel today. But we are here because we have made a commitment to being consistent in 2022 and not missing a show. And so we are putting on our big girl panties, and we are here doing a show for you, and we are excited about our conversation today. But I got to be honest, Harry, my mind and heart is outside because it is perfectly sunny and 83 degrees, and I'm ready. Like,
Get ready for that Midwest burn in.
Yep.
Yeah.
This isn't your only fan.
Oh yeah, that's the.
I got my gym socks pulled all the way up, half my way up my calves, ready to do some weed eating. I've got my white New Balance on. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get outside. I'm going to do a clean burn of the big green egg and clean that out too. I'm going to plant some flowers.
You're wearing sandals with those white socks, I hope, right?
No. These are white.
I mean, you're
Balance.
full. You got to be full dad mode, right?
Yeah.
So you have to wear black sandals or something.
So we went to, she's 3, and Reagan was at an event last night, and so we went out to Lowe's. We were going to the garden store, Damon's Lawn and Garden, which my cousins own. And they were closed, so we ended up at Lowe's, and so we got flowers there, which are of poorer quality, but so be it. And so she's been all morning. She's like, when are we going to plant these flowers? So as soon as we get this podcast done. Yeah. And then also joining us, hey, Harry, say hello to the people.
Hi, everybody. So I feel
Are you ready
too.
to get out and ready to get outside today?
Yeah, it's 80 degrees. I want to get my car. I want to open up the garage, get all the leaves and other junk that I've pulled into the garage. It's I want to get the RX-8 out and running, get this compression test done. Put some miles on that rotary.
What are you going to
do?
Earth
Day.
Reinhold, are you going to get out?
I want to so badly. It's so nice out. I've got 8. I got 40 acres, so I've got a lot of mowing to do. I've got a Ford Taurus that's half tore apart because I got to get the brake booster out. So I was working on it last night. It got dark and I had to stop. So I want to finish that. I've got trees to cut. I got so much stuff to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm feeling better. It's the first time. I mean, in early April. So we have read half the article, and then the other half will be this coming Wednesday's bonus show. But in the bonus episode for We Are Libertarians Patreon, you can hear me talk about my challenge with a MRSA. It is officially an antibiotic-resistant MRSA infection. And I think I got it at the gym, kind of leaning my head back on the walls of the YMCA steam room. Joining us also here is the pastor of Disaster, Vaughn, the social media disaster today, as you'll hear. And so I went to my 5th doctor's appointment in 2 weeks on it. And it's on the back of my neck, and it like swelled up really bad and huge. And I was really, really sick for like a week and a half. but we were consistent with the show. That's again, it's 2022, or the year of consistency.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Harry.
And any rumors of an assassination attempt on me to Chris is completely unfounded.
It's true. He did not try to kill me. This was me killing me. I woke up one Monday and I had like a lima bean, and then next thing I knew, it was like the entire back of my head was swollen. Ended up in the ER, and so I finally went for a checkup with the dermatologist a couple days ago. And Harry, what do you think if you go to the dermatologist and he gives you like a protocol for dealing with your MRSA infection? What do you think his advice would be?
Well, usually for me, it'd be like, here's some ibuprofen and some lotion and just, get some rest.
He wants me to take a bath 1 time a week in bleach, and he gave me some antibiotic ointment to rub on my anus.
What kind of, what? Are you in Gary? Is this Michael Jackson's doctor?
No. So apparently you bathe in bleach and it kills the MRSA, and then you have this antibiotic ointment you're supposed to put in your nose and on your fingernails, and apparently there can be a colony of staph infection on your anus.
Oh my God.
But I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. It's just not going to happen.
I knew a guy who used to treat his poison ivy by scrubbing it with a wire brush and Comet.
Oh, what? Why?
What? No.
He said it took care of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That break.
Vaughn
What it does with the wire is it breaks up all the pustules and stuff at one time, gets it all out of there, and cleans it all up.
So
Reinhold had his great grandmother did that to him back.
Yeah, remember,
in
we didn't have actual doctors back in the day. We had to figure out
wiping
this
his
stuff on our
butthole
own.
with corn cobs.
What
Isn't
you
it
do.
crazy to think that like toilet paper wasn't popular till the 20s and 30s, and so people just use corn cobs to wipe their butt?
Oh,
Ouch.
I found out last night that actually brushing your teeth with toothbrush and toothpaste wasn't something that was a thing until after World War II. And all
Really?
the GIs who were taught to do that during the war brought it back, and they started doing it. Before then, people would just take like salt and rub it with their teeth. With their
In
fingers.
ancient Rome, they used a sponge on a stick, and everyone used the same sponge.
Oh gosh. It's crazy because this infection would have killed me 100 years ago. It's just amazing the times that we live in, what we survive, and like it's we're very fortunate to live in America in 2022, despite what social media tells you. So Vaughn, you are an associate pastor at a small church in Ohio. You have the most like small church background imaginable. You've got the old filing cabinet with a random hanger with the random Bibles up there, with the basket that you probably use for collection. It's very funny.
You like my sheepskin?
Is there just a random sheepskin on the stairs?
My mother-in-law gave it to me. There's this Christian movie that was really popular about 20 years ago, something that anybody outside of Christian circles has probably never seen. But it was this old-time preacher who always carried a sheepskin around with him to pray on. So she raises sheep, so she decided I needed a sheepskin when I became a pastor.
And so you put it on the red velvet carpet
that leads to the baptistry.
Right. Well, all right, let's get into it. We gotta get to work here. First, I want to thank everybody who is a patron, everybody that makes this network exist. If you want to join, you can join at joinwall. I'm off my game. Joinwallplus.com. That's WAL for We Are Libertarians. You're going to get all kinds of great benefits to subscribing, like access to Wednesday Night Live, our weekly show just for patrons, access to the complete archives of the show and ad-free episodes. Plus, you'll be supporting the last bastion of true libertarianism that's left. It's pretty sad out there. and so you are going to be supporting all of our great shows. Thank you especially to our $100 a month members, Vincent Peichel, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Ryan Hold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. And today we're going to be talking about the article that many people are discussing. Many people. Some are saying it's the greatest article of all time. It is Jonathan Haidt's article. It's the lead in The Atlantic. It's 19 pages printed out. There's a ton here. I spent an hour kind of reading the first half to set up this episode. And I thought it was very thought-provoking and interesting, and Reinhold and Vaughn don't, and you'll hear why they're wrong. I don't know what Harry didn't even know what we were talking about today. And he's like, oh, hey, what are we talking about? It's like the article that I mentioned. You can go listen to the reading of the first half and commentary, the annotated version. I don't get the bonus show. So, but Harry has all kinds of thoughts on social media, and he's called it the lead pipes of Rome. So I think he probably agrees more in line with me. But just to give you a summation of this, Jonathan Haidt is a researcher. He wrote with Greg Lukianoff, I think is his name. He's head of FIRE, and they wrote a book called Coddling of the American Mind. And Haidt is a very well-respected researcher and kind of, in between and not necessarily on one team or the other, but he does go on Barry Weiss's podcast, which means Reinhold probably doesn't like him. Leftism, Harry. Mm-hmm. And so that was an unfair shot. Reinhold just sits and takes it now. And so he starts off with the story of Babel and talking about how Babel, you're not familiar with it. They're building a tower. I probably should let the pastor explain it, but they're building a tower up to heaven, and God and the angels come and scramble everybody's language to kind of create, a lot of confusion. And his version of the modern tower is social media. And the major transition that we've been going through over the last 20 years with it. Excuse me. So, maybe one of you guys, while I cough, can kind of explain the internet in 1 minute or less up until about 2014, when social media really started. Because social media up to 2012, 2013 wasn't very viral. And that's kind of what he talks about. He's like, Facebook and MySpace were posting pictures of yourself. What are you up to? Oh, I'm at home. Very boring stuff. And then they added the like button, the share button, the retweet button. And that's when the virality kicked in and really changed things. So, Harry, what was the internet like in the before times?
The internet was a beautiful, amazing series of tubes that connected things together.
It's like internet. A tube.
Well, technically, it kind of is. It kind of is tubes, but basically just a bunch of computers all talking to each other and sending different code and bits back to each other. But the internet in the before times was a magical, open place full of, how can you say, of travel blogs and chat rooms and MUDs,
GeoCities and
people creating sites and
Bartleby.com. You went there and you could read old books. And
the cool thing with the internet, it also had a bunch of search engines, so you have to find some of the stuff that was out there. That was the main driving force between how Google got so popular, because of the way it would have their spiders go out and crawl and find different things on the internet. And then people got very excited because they could find things out there that were different, weird, something outside their normal, or just finding people like them. But they also wanted to be able to share that with people in their own physical community or people that they know. And that was a piece that was missing to a lot of people, because back in the day, instead of the social media that we see, it was BBS boards, and you would only be on boards that your other people who had boards on, or someone had or maintained a board. So
I was on BBW boards. So what is the internet now for most people?
Now the internet is Facebook and Twitter and Instagram for most people. Well, technically, it's just nowhere. Meta, whatever it's calling itself these days. That's most people's internet. So I get frustrated a lot of people when they say oh, I've got to have this new powerful computer, but all they really do is get on a web browser and go to Facebook or or Meta and Twitter. And I'm like, you don't need a computer, you need a terminal.
No, we're calling it Facebook. We're not calling it Meta. We're not participating in that. It's Facebook.
Thank you. I can't keep Meta straight.
It's just not doing it. I'm not doing it. I hate this company. I was an early adopter. I loved the promise of social media. I have a career. Everything I do didn't exist when I graduated high school, like podcasting, video editing, which it existed, but it was 8 hours to render a transition. It was ridiculous. And
remember the
out
college
of the
render wars?
Yeah. I mean, so when 2005 it came to IUPUI, I was on Facebook. I'm number 19 million out of like the 3 billion people that are on it. I mean, I was an early adopter to all this stuff and trying to get my local radio station on social media to promote it. That's how I got the job at Bob and Tom 9 years ago, is that I had become really adept at social media, but you had a lot of organic growth. And over the last decade, Facebook has really like broken its promise with every creator that it exists on their platform. You can't get organic reach. You have to pay them for any kind of reach. You have to remember when your local dentist office was like on a profile, and then they said, no, you got to go to a page, and they incentivized you to go through a page. And they always do this, right? Like there's always the new hot product. Use live video, use reels, and we'll give you some algo lift until we steal somebody else's product, and then you'll have to use that because it's completely worthless. Like, I talked a little bit about in the bonus episode just about some of this, but Facebook in particular, I think, is the most unethical of the companies. I don't trust them at all. And so I really, when I read this article about he uses the term techno-democratic optimism, and I would definitely consider myself a techno-democratic optimist. That's why I'm so discordant with a lot of the paleo conservative libertarians, because they are like, well, we just need to all be growing our own food and living in a field and in a cabin, and isn't Ted Kaczynski great? But I really like, I think that technology is a force for good in a lot of ways, as I know Vaughn wants to outline. But I think we'd be crazy not to admit that there are some serious problems. And he talks a lot about in this article the issues with young women in particular, and the doubling of hospital admittance for suicide amongst teen girls. And, there was another article in National Affairs about some of this that talks a lot about the increase in suicidal feelings and thoughts since 2014 amongst teenagers. And there was the leaked data that was from Facebook that Facebook didn't want out there, but is out there now, published in the Wall Street Journal last year, basically saying, yeah, teens all tell us that it's Instagram's fault. They all say it is the constant comparison game that they're playing. Their entire world is on social media, and parents don't know what to do, because if they say you can't get on these social media apps, they don't have a social life. So I think all of us oldsters here who had a social life outside of any kind of social media remember what that was like, and how different it is now, which I think plays into some of this. But he talks about how the new game is encouraging dishonesty and mob dynamics, because the old Facebook, the old internet, was about connecting with friends and family. But then along the way, in order to juice the amount of time that people spend, they've gamified things, specifically your brain, to get you to spend 3 out of every 5 minutes on Facebook, which are the statistics that is pretty well known. And users are not guided just by their true preferences, but by their past experiences of reward and punishment, and their prediction of how others would react to each new reaction. One of the engineers at Twitter, who had worked on the retweet button, revealed that he regretted his contribution because it made Twitter a nastier place. We just handed a 4-year-old a loaded weapon. And when they created the viral loop that I was talking about, it started to make people more performative. It started to move away from, if I call Harry on the phone, or he comes over and we barbecue together, you're building connection. But on Facebook, if we're talking, it's usually trying to one-up each other. It's performative. It's trying to draw people to our sides. I'm having that fight with Rob Kendall right now on my Facebook page about the DeSantis stuff, because this is the greatest champion of liberty ever. And I'm like, he just raised taxes on 2 counties and saddled them with $1 billion in-kind contribution. And so it's Rob and I going back at each other on this stuff for the audience, right? For the people reading this. It's not us connecting or having a dialogue. We've talked all of this to death here on the show. But there's going to be, I read in that National Affairs article by Chris Griswold, I don't remember the title, but you can go and search National Affairs Chris Griswold and find it. And he takes an interesting tact in order to justify the regulation of big social media companies, in that because users are the product, and because they specifically target teenagers and Gen Z, that they are performing labor for these companies and therefore violating child labor laws. And we need to regulate this like tobacco. And I think the tobacco stuff, I want to do a history episode on the regulation of big tobacco, because I think that's exactly where this is headed. That's exactly where the conversation on both the left and right is turning, towards government action to fix these, what I think are very real problems with both teens and just the breakdown of social fabric, which he kind of goes on to talk about. But, his argument is that you are getting teens addicted to your product so they can perform labor for you, so you can get time on the platform, so therefore you can sell advertising. And that therefore it's unethical and you're using children, and so we have the right to regulate you. I don't think there's any one of the four of us that even remotely agrees with that and thinks that's a good idea. There's no possible way that the government regulating the internet in any way, shape, or form is going to fix the problem. But I do think that there's a problem. I think it's kind of insane to say that things haven't changed for our brains, for our society, for the way that we govern, for the way that we consume media. And in some ways, it's not been healthy. It's not been good. Harry, do you agree with that premise?
Well, yeah, it has not been good for some people. Some people have not been able to experience the fire hose of data, which is social media, or how the technology is working for them. It just is what it is.
Did you wait for me to cut you off?
Yeah, I was waiting for you to cut me off. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Because I was just saying that it's the same thing when the internet first started. Like when you were getting online in like 99 and 98, something like that, some people weren't even ready for that. Schools weren't even ready for that. The amount of, they were trying to, like, you have to use a book for a reference. It's like, well, I've got the exact same information from this book right here on this webpage. Why can't I use this webpage as a reference in my paper? Or you sit there and you can be able to, some things just aren't ready, and something takes a while to catch up to the to new product. It's just it is what it is.
Vaughn, go ahead.
Well, I just dropped a link in the chat to another study, and see, one of the issues is people cherry pick studies to defend their own view on a thing. The study I just dropped in was done by Columbia. It was released in 2020. And it finds that there is absolutely no correlation between social media usage and depression in teens and young people. Now, while it is true that those things have risen, depression and social media usage and all of that stuff have risen in those age groups, that's correlation. That's not causation necessarily. And the science is still out. I don't think we've proven that it's the social media that's causing it. I think there are a lot more other issues going on in our society right now that are causing it. Now, social media is an amplification tool, so it can be used to amplify some of those more root causes, but fixing social media won't fix the problems.
But other than the pandemic, which is only the last 2 years, what massive change has happened in the last decade other than the rise of social media and smartphones?
Dennis's turn.
That would cause a doubling of hospitalizations and
Sure.
Massive increases, other than an unhealthy use of technology.
A bunch of things. First of all, there's the outrage culture that has promulgated into
produced
society.
By what?
Well, produced by mostly politicians and media. Mm-hmm. You've got since 2001, when 9/11 happened, CNN, Fox, all of those have been nothing but constant things to be paid attention to. And then people started taking advantage of this, getting their message out, creating division. We've had nothing but division creation in this country since the mid to late 2000s. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Social media is a symptom. It is a tool that is being used, but it's not the only thing that's doing this. We've got, like I said, media, politicians, all this stuff is going on. and we don't have good sources of information, news sources, things like that we can all agree upon to use. So we're creating separate universes for people, realities. The realities are literally different, so we can't have a common communication with each other. And yeah, social media rising and being part of that is being affected by that, but it's not causing it. The causing of that is what we're doing.
Yeah, and I would put climate change in there as well. If you talk, I mean, you guys,
Harry, climate change is causing people.
No. Listen to me.
Climate change is making them crazy. Harry.
No, I'm not saying climate change is. I'm saying the fear around climate change is.
All right.
Think
Okay.
about-
All right.
So,
I can see that.
Yeah.
Think about the propaganda these kids are being taught about. Like, and climate change is real. I'm not denying that at all. But think about the way it's being presented to these kids day in and day out. If we don't fix this in 2 years, the world is doomed. If we don't fix this in 5 years, the world is doomed. If we don't, and so these kids, so many young people are like nihilists to the extreme because they literally do not believe
They don't have
that
hope.
the world will exist in 40 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah.
they don't want to have kids.
Yeah,
So that's
there's
going
a
to
lot of
create depression.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I remember because, like, all right, so this past Thursday was my birthday, and I was telling people, like, I'm 37 years old, and I didn't think I would make it this far. And I'm like, oh my god, you think about, like, it's not a depression. Like, I think I'm gonna, like, self-delete. This is like, I was always told the Earth was going to be completely destroyed from our actions by this time. What's the retirement count? Just say screw it. This whole thing is going to go burn up. Thank you, Gen X, for like giving that nihilism to the other generations. But it's that idea that, like, yeah, these kids really do believe that like they're taught like that the world isn't going to make it because these greedy oil companies and everyone else is polluting, and if you don't do your part, that something's going on, and they're getting hit by that type of propaganda, and also being ill-taught about like climate change, which also has the reverse effect of turning people into climate change deniers. Because if you could do like math, you go like, okay, this doesn't make any sense because there's things called like the carbon cycle.
But it's not that you guys are wrong, but think of the amount of volume and velocity that is involved here. Like when you're talking about seeing a poster on a wall in a school and a couple sections in a class, once a month, yeah, that can have an effect. But we're talking about 2 to 4 minutes every 5 minutes that these kids are on this stuff. I mean,
right.
I think you're underestimating how much of it they're getting from the schools.
They're getting a lot of that from the school, but a lot of it is still backed up from social media. I don't blame the internet. The internet is just a tool to connect computers together, but social media is blastering this stuff. We have proof that Facebook has done freaking mental experiments onto people so they can convince people to do different things, and improbably done code can do some amazing, awful things.
But that's sort of the point, is the constant reinforcing of this information is the problem. Right. It's the viral loop that's the problem.
The problem
is
the
gamification of it, keeping you coming back, keeping you, like, the same thing with like a YouTube in the beginning of it when YouTube first started. Like, people were just putting videos out there, and then when YouTube wanted to compete with Netflix, it started to mess with his algorithm so it could get type of Game of Thrones quality content, squish things everything to 10 minutes, and you got all these like 10-minute videos, and everyone started making 10-minute videos to make different things out, to hit with that span. Then they started to prioritizing 10-minute videos, then prioritizing that you upload every day. So this loop of YouTubers having to make these videos, 10-minute videos every day and ever so often to stay with the algorithm loop, it created that thing.
Go ahead, Vaughn.
I was just going to say, saying that YouTube or social media is the source of the problem, that's not true. The source of the problem is the sources of the information. And if you look at the polarization, that's one of the things that Haidt is claiming is caused by social media. No, the polarization problem was happening before social media. If you look at the stuff that most of the crazy, like your crazy aunt or your crazy uncle are posting, they're getting it from Fox News. They're getting it from OWN. They're getting it from MSNBC. They're getting it from Mother Jones. So social media is a way.
What 13-year-old girl is watching Mother Jones on YouTube?
You'd be surprised, actually, on that one.
I know your kids are nerds, but like,
I would think that it would be more.
I would think that it would
It's
be
not the
more
subject.
exactly what the children are saying when surveyed repeatedly and in large groups.
So you're
is that
trusting children to know what their problems are caused by.
I think it's a perfectly valid signal when Facebook has data that leaks and they I'll have to go grab the article and read the statistics to you. But why wouldn't we listen to them when they say that the constant comparison game is the main problem? That's the main source of my self-esteem issues. And as a pastor, I think we can both agree that when a person is constantly turned inward and thinking about themselves and comparing themselves to others and coveting what other people have, it creates a sickness of the soul. It creates a very toxic cycle that is hard to break out of when you are picking up your phone 2,200 times a day.
Right.
But you don't
And
fix that by
kids-
stopping social media.
Kids are watching Own and Mother Jones, stuff like that, but they're getting it through 10-minute videos of their favorite YouTuber describing it. Hey, I know we talked about slime last week. Let's go ahead and let's talk about this Mother Jones article I have right here, or this Fox News article. They're still getting it. They're just getting it, mushed down from that different excerpt, but they're still getting it here on social media, stuff like that. No, the complete comparison game, they get it all the time. I have to deal with that stuff. We talk about it all the time in my yoga class and different martial arts that we do, that there is yoga and martial arts for Instagram. But here's reality. So many people hurt themselves in yoga because they try to get a certain yoga pose that they see it on Instagram and they they rush for that pose and their body's not ready and they end up blowing out their knee. They're hurt their back because they're trying to get a certain angle, a certain pose,
I'm sorry. Someone getting injured doing yoga has me in stitches.
No, it happens. No, trust me. There's tons of yoga injuries. Just because you're on a mat and you're just stretching, you can hurt yourself. There's several different poses that people try before their body is ready and they just completely blow out their knee. They blow out their knee. Because they're just not ready. They have too much weight in an area, or their hamstrings are just too tight, and they force themselves in there because gravity will help them. They blow out their knee. Standing heel to toe. That one usually gets people. Or doing what is it? Not what's the back? Yeah, a lot of the back bends before, a lot of people see me do my back bends. I've got to warm up. There's a whole bunch of exercises I do, so that I'm able to back bend, just for simple effect from wrestling and just doing different yoga poses.
So it's the yoga podcast now?
It can be.
Well, I come back to goat
We
yoga.
can talk about wrestling. I know about that.
No,
Yeah. Well, yeah. My bridge is
go ahead,
wrestling.
Reinhold, go ahead.
Well, when we talk about the issue, and Jackie has a point too, it's that Instagram helps make girls feel bad about themselves because body dysphoria and things like that. People, there's a lot of body issues that are going on, but that was also being done by Cosmopolitan and all the photoshopping done in magazines and all this stuff. So it's happening. Social media is amplifying it. It's getting it into their brains more often than
instead of reading one Cosmo a month for 5 minutes, you're seeing a Cosmo 15 times a minute. I mean, that's
right. And it's amplifying. It's amplifying the problem, but it's not the problem. It's we can tamp down the amplification, but then we lose all the positive benefits of that amplification tool as well.
And we never fix the problem.
Yeah,
which is.
Oh, I mean, it's just
how people deal with each other.
Yeah, not teaching people how to deal with those things. There's many of the tech people I follow, I listen to tons of tech podcasts, but many of them have frank and open discussions with their children about how to use social media. And they don't ban it from them. They let them use it, but they're like, okay, here's are the things you got to watch out for. Here are the things you got to worry about. And I'm telling you.
Whoa. Are you saying that people should parent and instead of letting the government parent? What are you talking about?
And honestly, if you look at it in whole, Gen Z on the whole is actually better at using social media in a healthy way than boomers, especially the older generations, because they're learning the rules of how to do it.
Harry, do you agree?
I think that's a false comparison to compare anything to boomers, because boomers use everything terrible. Remember,
well, I would say
boomers destroyed our world, people.
Here's a good comparison.
We had glass jars, paper bags, things were biodegradable and reusable. Then boomers came around. It's Reinhold's fault. He should have stopped them.
He's not even really a boomer. He's like
Gen X tried to stop the boomers.
Them.
We hate the boomers more than the millennials do, and I don't think people understand, or they underestimate just how badly that hate is.
I do think that you have Vaughn. What was your last point? I knew I'd lose it.
That the newer generations are starting to better understand how to use these tools.
Yeah, so I think a good comparison is my age bracket. I'm 38, at the spear of the millennials. And when these tools came along, I saw an opportunity to be self-promotional. And it would be impossible for me to scrub myself from the internet.
Yeah.
Because I saw it as an opportunity to grow a personal brand, to grow things like this podcast, to use it as a promotional platform. And I see in those little time hops that you get on Facebook, there's a marked shift in like 2012, just exactly right in the time frame that Height is talking about. It's like, and you do this too. If you go and look, it's like Chris Spangle is at home, had a long day, had like very like vanilla stuff, right? And then it becomes very self-promotional. And when I've had Gen Z interns, or I have, my sister-in-laws are all like under 24, down to 16, and they are not on Facebook. Really, they have an account maybe, but they don't, they don't post personal stuff about their lives.
Nope.
Like Gen Z has seen the wreckage of millennials and the sex scandals and the leaked internet pictures and all that stuff, which I think why Snapchat caught on, but that's dying too. Like TikTok's where it's at, and that in a lot of ways TikTok is kind of wholesome compared to Facebook. It depends, right? Like it's I don't know.
Depends on what side of TikTok you're on.
The apocryphal tale of the youth pastor talking about the dangers of TikToks and booty shaking, and then the girl raises her hand and said, "It's all based on what you look at in the algorithm, sir." But this article, National Affairs, is from the AEI, which is a Republican think tank, and I referenced it earlier. It's called "Protecting Children from Social Media." And he kind of talks about the defining the harm, which is, the economic imperative of maximizing market share and not necessarily caring for their users in any way, shape, or form, which I don't think any of us could disagree that Facebook doesn't care about us. And social media executives see no moral dimension or limiting principle to their ambitions of increasing shareholder value. And so these are some of the leaked Instagram research that I was mentioning. Quote, using Instagram makes body image challenges worse for 1 in 3 teen girls and social comparison struggles worse for 1 in 5. Across teen boys and girls, 1 in 5 report feeling worse about themselves. The researchers asked a group of teenagers who had experienced one of the several mental or emotional health challenges in the past month whether a given issue had started on Instagram. An astounding 42% reported their feelings of not having enough money started on the platform. Perhaps an indication of the commercial impulses and what kids are shown on social media. So they didn't have enough money to buy something they wanted. Similar, 41% reported that feelings of not being attractive began on Instagram. 39% said the same regarding pressure to having a perfect image. And 1 in 4 indicated as much regarding their sense of not being good enough. A tenth reported that their depression began on Instagram. 9% that their desire to self-harm did, and 6% that their desire to kill themselves did. In commentary attempting to mitigate these statistics, Facebook clarified an error in the PowerPoint slide, saying the estimates for wanted to hurt themselves and wanted to kill themselves should be flipped. A major vector along which this harm travels is social pressure, a natural teenage phenomenon. Quote, teens blame Instagram for increases in the rates of anxiety, depression amongst teens, read the headline of one of their slides, which reported that unprompted and consistent across all groups, teens believe that constant comparison driven by social media is the reason why there are higher levels of anxiety and depression in young people. Teens who are already struggling with these issues are especially vulnerable. And teens are acutely aware that Instagram can be bad for their mental health, but it does not lead to disengaging. They feel compelled to using the service. And the addictive reality distortion quality of social media leads to harms beyond digitally amplified social pressures. And he just goes on to give more and more of these statistics, including the way that TikTok drives extreme weight loss for young girls. As one dietitian who treats such disorders bluntly concluded, the algorithm is just too freaking strong. TikTok, I mean, this is about Instagram. TikTok has as a person who has worked as a social media director for 20 years, TikTok is the culmination of a perfectly built platform to game your brain. And you will just get lost for 45 minutes watching all of this content. I will do it. I'll do it occasionally. I started using it in January for work, and I'll be reading and I'll go, I wonder what the castle in England that I'm reading about looks like. Pick up my phone. 45 to 50 minutes later, I'll be on TikTok watching Aerosmith videos. Right. So it probably happens to you guys all the time too.
Less now.
Now, a couple things about that, and then Vaughn, you can respond.
Okay.
Big tobacco. Finally, like they had the studies, right? Like this is an Instagram study. They had the studies, and then eventually, once it all started leaking, and they started getting pressure from governments, they started saying, the data is all flawed. So he talks about that's probably where they're headed. But you can't let up. You got to regulate them. This is poison, Vaughn. It's killing our kids, and for the children, we must regulate social media.
Well, here's the problem with that. Number one, shut down Facebook, shut down Instagram, shut down TikTok. What happens? Something new is going to come to replace them. Boom. There's not going to be a vacuum. Something new will come, something that is just as bad or potentially worse. Why is it so bad for the U.S. to go in and overthrow bad dictators? Because we don't know who's going to replace them, right?
Right.
We could assassinate Putin, and then the next guy to come in makes Putin look like a peace child loving hippie.
He could be Z, Harry. It could be worse than Z even.
So, and the same thing is true with social media. If we get rid of those, what could replace them? But my biggest concern, honestly, Facebook, you aren't going to find me saying Facebook is a good company. My biggest problem with the article is the fear mongering, especially the one headline, which was people are far stupider, how it's made people stupider in the past 10 years. Well, I'm sorry, but you are greatly underestimating the stupidity of people throughout history.
No, I think, and to be fair, Haidt talks about it in the article. He's like, there's no going back. You're not putting this back.
No,
all we can do is
work
within these frameworks, like the future of democracy, the future of how government operates, the future of the Republican and Democratic parties, the future of your kids' social lives. Like these are all permanently altered, and Facebook intended to do that and did it, and this is just where we're at. So we need to figure out a way forward.
I don't think they intended to change things. Facebook has
of course they
far
did.
less. No, they have far less control over how things have ended up than they want to pretend.
Zuckerberg in February 2012, when he's launching the IPO, says, "Today our society has reached another tipping point." He wrote in a letter to investors. Facebook hoped to rewire the way people spread and consume information by giving them the power to share, and it would help them once again transform many of our core institutions and industries. That has happened. It may not have happened in the way that he thought it would, but it certainly transformed society in a big way.
It's social media, and in some ways, this is a larger conversation about the internet. Many people are using social media and the evils of social media really as a stand-in to talk about the evils of the internet overall. And just this idea that the wrong people are being allowed to talk. And that's the part of the diatribe. That's the part of this that I especially don't like. I'm not saying Haidt necessarily specifically doing it, but a lot of the people who are glomming onto his article here are talking about, like, you had you had Matthew Iglesias write, social media has democratized content and broadened the range of people able to participate in the discourse. And one thing it's done is prove that a huge share of the population is intellectual, lazy, and unworthy to participate. So you have Iglesias saying that the majority of people should not be allowed to have a voice. They should not be allowed to talk. And that's my biggest fear with where this conversation is going, is that's what a lot of these people want. They want the gatekeepers back. They don't want to let people talk anymore. They don't want people to have a voice. They want to control that. They want to be able to say who can talk and who cannot.
No, I think we've talked about this in the past. I mean, that's the reason that the New York Times and all these news that they want to kill Facebook because of
they do
anger over stealing all of their classified ad money.
Yep.
But I will tell you that Craigslist and all that, Facebook is not getting the return anymore in the same way. Like the The reality is Facebook is a dying product, but you're right. There's something that
Absolutely.
will replace it. But Reinhold, isn't it true that people are dumber now because they're on their social media? They're not reading books like they used to.
So there's a lot of reasons why people are dumber now. And actually, one of those is something I saw in a documentary yesterday about the use of lead gasoline that actually lowered the IQ of the planet by over 800 million collective points during this later part of the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s. So that's one thing, but that's not what we're talking about now. The clickbait headlines, the creation of the different realities, the being able to use propaganda so effectively. When we have gatekeepers and we have the newspapers, you limit a lot of that stuff because it's harder to once you have like people in charge, they want to do it right. They don't want to have bad consequences. So they start trying to self-police. They do good journalism is what was coming out of that. Right now we have citizen journalism, which is great, but the propagation of propaganda and just outright lies that people believe starts to permeate and create these different realities for people. And then there's no common knowledge or common understanding of what's going on that we can work from. There was
But that's exactly what he talks.
authors.
That's exactly what he talks about in the article. You and him actually agree. If you guys had read the article,
I don't. No. I'm not saying I completely disagree with everything he said. I'm just saying some of the conclusions and some of the fallacies he has in there give people the wrong impression at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of wrong with social media, but there's a whole bunch wrong with a lot of regular media. There's a whole bunch wrong with politics in general. All of that is working in Congress with each other. And social media is just one of those outlets that's helping cause the problem. If we could get the root problem taken care of, the social media would be less of an issue.
Yeah, because he talks about, one result is that young people educated in the post-Babel area are less likely to arrive at a coherent story of who we are as a people, and less likely to share any story with those who attend different schools or who were educated in a different decade. That doesn't necessarily. I see the problems, but I also don't necessarily see that as a problem.
No.
Opening up the public square. That's why I have a problem with censorship on these platforms. Is closing down the public square and alienating voices because they posted a Jeffrey Dahmer meme is inherently bad.
Like or a Bleach meme.
I mean, we've had a lot of people come into. Have more a lot of marginalized groups have a more prominent voice in this era than they did in the past because of that.
Yeah. Well, all right. So I've actually had this type of discussion.
Harry, I'm going to stop you right there. We can't let you talk. So
no. I as someone who's an early adopter on the internet, who's been on the internet for years, like I was actually pro gatekeeping the rest of you losers on the internet. I hated they're making it easier. They're making it all these, and everyone just started getting on the net. And I was like, I don't know. I thought this was a good idea, but some of you guys aren't ready for this thing. And that's why Gen Z is because they got to see a lot of these bad issues of how other people have used it. So they're just kind of ready for it because the rest of you guys aren't. Some of you aren't. Some of you have no idea that how this thing works, gets on it. There's so many easy grandma adjust buttons that you end up spinning up crap and just spewing other crap that you've learned online. And then and just like Reinhold said, it's easy to propagate propaganda because we have no center of truth. Because even though someone does have something, our education system has falsely taught people how to read studies and how to bring different things together. Our education system has also made people stupid, dumb, and ignorant. They've actually been hip to be ignorant. Most people you have these stupid paper degrees out there. All these people have these stupid paper degrees that have learned nothing. They basically somehow paid and got their way through college, and so they have I've got a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Science, and I'm this type of scientist or mathematician, but they don't know crap. They don't know anything. I'm not even talking about humanities. Their math is terrible. They have terrible logic. They have no, and then they look down on people who don't have these degrees because they view themselves better than everyone else. But I tell you, I will take any of them on with a truck driver who listened to podcast all day, because that guy's probably technically more well read than you are.
Yeah, so he kind of brings up a point Reinhold made in the section called Things Fall Apart. Historically, civilizations have relied on shared blood, gods, and enemies to counteract the tendency to split apart as they grow. What holds together large and diverse secular democracies like the United States or India? Social scientists have identified at least three major forces that collectively bind together successful democracies: social capital, extensive social networks with high levels of trust, which we talked about civil society in a bonus episode a couple weeks ago; strong institutions. So, for instance, when a president tries to basically just stay in office, strong institutions were able to force him out; and shared stories. Social media has weakened all three. To see how we must understand how social media has changed over time, and then he gets into the viral stuff.
I would, on the trust thing, and I think the trust thing is a very important part of this discussion. I don't think social media is to blame for the loss in trust.
No, I think Iraq is. I mean, Vietnam,
Iraq,
that's part
Watergate,
of it, but it's a continuous slide.
What is to blame for the lack of trust in institutions is that the institutions themselves are not trustworthy. And because of the increase in how, we have so many more ways of learning things and seeing things. We have cameras. I mean, look at the trust in police. I mean, people are learning more and more. Everyone's, the police are more dangerous. They're more violent. They're more everything than they've ever been. No, they're not. They're actually much more professional than they used to be.
Funny anecdote.
We have cell phones that we can record everything, so we know about it. So that's what's happening.
18.
Sorry.
This is how libertarian my in-laws are. My 18-year-old sister-in-law read a story about a police officer helping a stray cat or something, and had no concept that police did anything other than hurt people. Like, they helped. It was so funny, the realization.
And so part of it is people. In one regard, many of the institutions are just not as trustworthy as they used to be. They are doing things to lose the trust actively. I mean, look at Fauci. How much has he degraded the trust in the institution of the Centers for Disease Control? The past 3 years have completely destroyed Americans' trust in that institution. That's not social media's fault. That's the institution's fault. And so the problem, I mean, we're losing trust in our society, but the fix isn't to ban social media. The fix is to build new institutions that are trustworthy.
I've got a great thing that happened in 1995. Right. There's an author named Terry Pratchett. Harry knows who I'm talking about because I went on about him a lot recently.
I've read most of his books. Show.
Right. So he had an interview with Bill Gates in 1995 for GQ. And he states that he was talking to Bill Gates about the future of the internet. And he said he was concerned. He says, let's say I call myself the Institute of something or other, and I decide to promote a spurious treatise saying that the Jews were entirely responsible for the Second World War and that the Holocaust didn't happen. Now, and it goes out there on the internet and is available on the same terms as any other piece of historical research, which has undergone peer review and everything else. There's a kind of parity of esteem of information on the net, so that if it's out there, it's equal to other pieces of information, equal rights, equal time. He says it's all there. There's no way of finding out whether this stuff has any bottom to it or whether someone has just made it up. Now, Gates did not agree with him. Gates responded with saying that the electronics give us a way to classify things. You will have authorities. You will have authorities on the net, and because an article is contained in their index, it will mean something. The whole way that you can check somebody's reputation will be so much more sophisticated on the net than it is in print. Now, who do you think was right? The problem is that society wasn't ready for this. This is like I've been saying before. I love libertarianism. I think libertarianism is the way to go. I don't think society's ready for it, full blown libertarianism. We have to get people to that direction. It's the same thing with pure democracy. This stuff that's happening is proving that we aren't there yet as a society. We need to get there. We need to work towards it. But there's going to be a lot of stops and bumps and failures along the way to get there.
This is just the latest evolution in the transformation of information sharing in our world, and you saw the same type of upheaval with every other one too.
Yeah,
I
I remember
think-
that interview was 1995. There was foresight into this. People
Yeah.
saw this coming.
And we will eventually get gatekeepers, but what we want is the gatekeepers to be society and culture and people themselves, and not Facebook or the Washington Times or the New York Times.
Exactly what I've been arguing. Like the second you start moderating what people can say politically, you're not the good judge of that. They're a horrible judge of that. They're banning Vaughn for bleach memes from 3 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no reason that Vaughn isn't a responsible person on the internet. Like on the internet, not in real life. But the reality is that this is where we're at. And so I think, Harry, make your point, and then we ought to talk about what we ought to do as we finish up this episode.
Oh, well, they go back to those things. Is like when people started like weaponizing the ban button, and then I think the other problem we have are people, like I said, like they just use Facebook to, that is the internet to them, and then being stuck in these places, it prevents us having to be able to have like this thing is an authority, or because I think so many things that went to the internet, they try to mimic things in real life space for that type of like authority figure, and
exactly
a lot of that is also being dragged out. I think we also have older generations, their souls are too weighed down by the gravity of this world, and they don't want to ascend to get to anywhere else. What they are, you can, regardless of anyone wants to realize this or not, but education is technically free. It's freaking out there. You can get your bachelor's degree in physics on the internet. You can. It's out there. MIT's been giving away basically courses for the last 10 plus years online for free. You just take an MIT course. They're great. They're awesome. Go ahead and do one. But is MIT the end all be all of technical schools? Heck no. You can go to Purdue. Purdue does stuff like this. Or you can just read a freaking book, go to your freaking library. And I think people's lack of imagination being hampered by a lot of these things are letting them think. Because
so I think the correct position is don't buy into the fear mongering that the internet is bad and that social media is going to kill you. But you do need to be very aware, especially with your kids, that this is a harmful substance, and you need to parent, and you need to use it. And let me say something to you to channel Miss Pat. If you talk to social workers or teachers, especially social workers in elementary schools, the symptoms of neglect in children are at epidemic proportions right now, and it's not because more kids are being neglected by their parents for any reason other than they're just on their phone all the time. If you're a parent, I have to do it all the time. This morning, I'm sitting there and she's like, will you play with me? And I'm like playing Civilization on my iPad. And I'm like, no, I'm just relaxing. She's like, please, pretty please. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's play. Like but I didn't want to. I didn't want to play with her. I wanted to just relax and play my game and watch Andy Griffith. But you have to at some point put down the device and engage in your kid's life. And we had conversation and it was fun. And so I've really had to kind of take that piece of information from a couple of social worker friends and adopt that in how we parent the child, the 3-year-old, because I don't want her to feel neglected. And being
that's
on
also a work-life balance issue as well.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of those parents are glued to their cell phones because they have to be for work.
This nonsense notion that you have to be connected 24/7.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just say to your employer, no. They can't fire you because they can't replace you right now.
Especially right now. Yeah. You hit that. You give your employer the line like, hey, you know what? You can call me after 5 o'clock, but understand that I'm going to be drunk. Okay?
And so I think there's a lot of benefits here, and you have to remember the benefits of, all right, around the horn real quick. We got to get going here. Harry, final thoughts.
My final thoughts on this thing is, social media is a poison, and you should actually understand that it is and regulate it as such. I think it shouldn't be regulated as tobacco. I think it should be regulated like it's kind of like alcohol with your kids. And by regulation, I'm not talking about some government regulation. You should regulate yourself. with your own community and how you want to do so in your own family. You don't need the government to come down and put a regulation for it. You can do it yourself. If you need help with it, go ahead, reach out to that local tech person that you know. They will help you with your kids in doing that. It despises me that I have to get my kid online to a GUI interface because that's what our school wants to do. I wanted my daughter to first piece of tech she ever touched or technology would have to be, well, the command line, just like I did, just a blinking cursor blinking at her on a nice, old black and white screen. I had the Tandy set up and ready to go, and school's like, nope, they're getting Chromebooks. I'm like, oh god, this is awful, it's terrible, I hate it, hate AlphaGoog. But yeah, that's my take on this thing.
Yeah, I just think that we need to. So there's a problem with social media. We need to figure out what to do about it, how to best kind of mitigate the damage that can be done while still elevating the positives. But the real issue's got to be, we've got to figure out as a society how we're going to handle information sharing in a way that is not giving elevation to things that are entirely wrong, entirely unfactual, made up, propaganda, etc. We have to have sources of authority that we can go to. We have to have ways that we can say, okay, this, the idea of Snopes was probably a great idea. The fact that the owner of Snopes decided to go a different political direction with it is unfortunate. But the idea of having a place that was non-biased and would look at things and say, this is true, this is not true, here's the facts, here's the evidence, look it up for yourself, figure it out. Those types of things are what's going to help us. There's been a lot of times in history where, like, the Republicans or the Democrats are trying to push a fake story about somebody, just like they did Dan Rather with Bush. And social media, which at the time was just called internet, within 24 hours had proven him to be completely wrong, because the typefacing and everything else on the letter and all that stuff. So all that stuff happened years ago, but we just need to figure out how we are going to find those sources of truth of information and how to elevate things that are true and de-elevate and diminish all the conspiracy theories and propaganda and everything else that's out there. So I think that's the biggest key. And clickbait articles aren't going to help. News media having all these opinion shows where they just talk about things to try and get people propagandized, that's not helping. None of this stuff is helping. We need to really focus on what the real problem is.
You can only trust us, so donate to our Patreon. Vaughn?
Okay. Oddly, I found my closing comments are actually going to be something I wrote 2 years ago about social media. But I wrote, whenever there is a new technology, innovation, or mode of communication, it is quickly followed by a fear that this is the thing that will destroy humanity. When the printing press was invented, when dime novels became a thing, when newspapers happened, when radio went online, when TV came, in every case there was a panic. Sermons were preached against the new thing. Sermons were preached against teddy bears, for example. Speeches given, political parties formed, articles written, all to warn people of the new evil thing that society can never recover from. Teddy bears, bicycles, cars, airplanes, pocket mirrors, dime novels, pamphlets, all were said to mean the end of civilization, and the dire predictions of doom were never realized. Every single time, when reminded of these past failures to predict the end, we are told, but this time it's different. This time it's too powerful, too much, too fast. And every time our society acclimates itself to the new technology and figures out how to use it. Social media can be a huge blessing. Imagine what this pandemic would be like without it. Imagine what the 1918 flu was like when you couldn't DM your grandma to see how she's doing. You couldn't set up a Zoom with your high school friends in lieu of your 20th anniversary. Right now, I can go to the Facebook wall of any of my friends I'm worried about to see how they're doing. I can send them a quick word of encouragement or support. I can joke around in my group chats and get to know new people. Without Facebook or other similar technologies, and hopefully we'll get some better ones, high-risk people in churches wouldn't be able to attend the church services without being exposed to COVID-19. This was written during the pandemic, by the way. They would be stuck at home alone. Do people use technology for evil? Absolutely, all the time. It doesn't take long for us humans to figure out how to use a new thing in a very bad way, but we also find good ways to use them, ways to help each other, love each other, and care for each other. Instead of panicking over how something new is destroying society, think about how we can use it to do good. It's a tool. It can be used to destroy, but it also can be used to build.
All right, very good. Thank you to Vaughn. Thank you to Harry. Thank you to everybody that's listening and to our patrons. We appreciate you being here. Make sure you go and download the podcast in any podcast app. That helps us a lot. And be sure to just be nice to people. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week.